So welcome everyone. I'm very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and the question moderator for today's webinar, Retirement on the Horizon, a Public Library Director's Primer. And I know maybe some of you today are not necessarily directors, but I think that the information will definitely be able to be applied to all library staff. So we do have an awesome panel speaking on this subject today. We've got Lynn Hobbs, the current director of the Pendleton Community Library, Mary Kay Emmrich, the former director of the Newton County Public Library, but she is still there. She's just in a different role. And we've got Marilyn Wood. She is the retired director of the Monroe County Public Library. So they will be talking about their experiences, and just keep in mind your situation will be unique to you. So we're just see what we can apply to ourselves. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. After the webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's archive webinars page. If you're watching an archive recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU will be in the video's description in YouTube. And for weekly updates and on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. And also check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. So we'll get started. Just a reminder again, make sure if you can change your chat to everyone instead of all panelists and attendees, that would be awesome. Okay, so just to show you what's on the agenda today, well, next slide we're going to do introductions for each of our panelists. We're going to go over some questions and topics, and then we'll wrap it up with some last minute questions. Okay, so I'll go ahead and you can start. We'll start with Lynn.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lynn Hobbs. I'm the director of the Pendleton Community Public Library. I've been here for over 17 years. And prior to that, I've worked in other libraries. I've worked in libraries since I was 14 years old. And only 9 months of my entire life, which was when I was a freshman in college, have I been unemployed. So I'm about 5 years out from retirement, but I'm ready.
Okay, Mary Kay. Oh, make sure you unmute. Yeah, it's all right. Oh.
I had to unmute myself. I'm Mary Kay Emmrich, and apparently I'm ready to retire. I am the former director of the Newton County Public Library. I was the director here for 27 years and came here from Jasper County from a previous tech services and branch manager position. I switched hats in January. I'm now a systems specialist. It's a branch manager with benefits. I do a variety of things, and I'll be doing that for 2 years until I retire at the end of 2023. My retirement coincides with the retirement of the bond for these facilities. So I'm retiring when the debt retires.
All right, last but not least, we got Marilyn.
Well, hi there. So I am Marilyn Wood, and I retired as the director of Monroe County in May of this year. So prior to that, I was director for about 7 years, just at the library, and I was associate director for 3 years prior to that. And then I have spent way more years than I even care to say in library world, mostly in academic libraries prior to my public library experience. I worked at Harvard University for 17 years and at IU for 10 years. So I was ready to retire, but it's been a short retirement so far.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and get right into things, making the decision to retire. So I'm just going to let you guys go ahead. I guess it doesn't matter who starts.
Well, I'll just jump in and start. So I think, as we said at the beginning of this recording, this is all very personal and very different for everyone. So some of the things that I think that are really important just to prepare yourself for is that when you decide to retire, all of those decisions are personal to you, but they're going to be a lot of people who ask you questions, and they're running. First of all, may be shock that when you announce, and then there are going to be questions, and you have to be prepared to answer what those questions are. So to be able to talk about what you're going to do later, if you know what that is, they're going to ask you things like, for me anyway, my personal experiences, but why are you retiring now? You're in the middle of building that new branch. How can you do that? What are we going to do? You know, every library will go on after you leave. Things will continue. You just have to ensure that you feel good about what you're going to do, that you understand what retirement's going to mean to you. And I think that you'll feel better if you have had the opportunity to explore personally what retirement means to you. I actually had a conversation with my doctor, and I never expected this one to happen, but she said to me, so what are you going to do after you retire? How are you going to continue to learn? What are you going to do about healthcare? And have you been considering these things? Because your insurance will likely change, and you need to consider the things that are going to be impacted by that and what your healthcare is going to look like. She wanted to know a little bit about my friends and my social activities and how I was going to keep up, because as she said, and then with your spouse or your significant other, how you are going to work this thing out together, because it is a change to your life, as well as a change to what has been perhaps some of your identity and your life in the past with working. So you just have to work through all of those things, and that takes a little bit of time. So you may want to, which I suspect many of you have already been thinking about what retirement might look like to you, but really after you make that decision and after you start to go through your files and throw things out and really consider what your career look like, it's going to be one of those roller coasters.
One of the things you really need to start thinking about is your age 65, I'm going to call it age 65 planning. You need to look into Medicare. You need to find out about what you need to know about your medical coverage. There are Medicare navigators in every community, and they'll take you through the program, determine what you need, and help you find what you need. They're insurance salespeople, but when they're functioning as navigators, they can't sell. This is similar to the programs that we offer at our libraries with navigators. If you ask them to sell you a policy, they will, but they cannot give you a sales pitch. Talk to your friends and to learn about their journeys. Contact Social Security via the website, or schedule a phone interview to address your need for information. And talk to your tax advisor and your financial planner. Know what you need to do financially. Don't expect that your SOCH and your PERF are going to cover everything. If you haven't made a plan, be thinking about it. If you have a plan, be initiating it. Get everything in order. You can visit the PERF website and get information from their FAQ. You can talk to representatives about your other resources. But along with financial planning, you need to do some emotional planning. You need to, as Marilyn beautifully said, the library will continue on without you. First of all, you need to embrace that. There's a little humble sandwich that gets served right about this time that tells you that life will go on without you. And you have to expect that. If you stay in your role, or if you stay in a different role at your organization, you have to be ready to stand back for that. If you fully retire, try to separate yourself from the day-to-day workings of the library. You might live in the community. Don't visit the library every day. Don't open yourself up to be a sounding board for disgruntled staff, because, some of our staff don't like change. And change is going to happen because change is as natural as the sun and the moon and the wind and the water. Use streaming services for a while. Use your online services. If you plan to remain employed like I have, be prepared to go to another building so that you step away and you give that new administrator the opportunity to acclimate without you undermining any authority that person develops. But most of all, be prepared to witness that change.
I don't have a ton actually to add because I'm not quite on the horizon of retirement. Obviously, I'm thinking about it, but I have several years yet to go. So for me, I'm lucky to be in a position where I can kind of orchestrate things from, years in advance. It's not just a decision for me at this point. It's also, I think, a decision for the library. I love this place. I want to see it succeed when I'm not here anymore. I will realize when I've kind of run my course, if you will. I want to see it under new leadership, and I want to set my successor up for success. And I love the alliteration of that too, by the way.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Well, this brings it up to the first question we only got about 3 questions. So if anyone wants to start talking about this one or parts of it.
So I will, again, this is so much about your own personal situation. I'm not 65 yet, so I had some other considerations to make. And a lot of the things, I guess the biggest advice that I would say here is that it's just, there's some portion of this that it's like budget 101. You got to know what your expenses are. You got to know what's going to change. You got to know what your income streams are. And you have to gather a lot of information. So if you've had more than one job and you have either pensions or retirement funds in various places, you need to know what all of those things are, and you need to talk to people. So anyone that can give you advice on PERF, Social Security, and I will say that and having gone through retirement with my husband recently, and who is over 65, the Social Security website is really very good and easy to use. And so, but you need accounts there. So go ahead and set your account up. Go ahead and take a look at it and explore it and see what it looks like. And they'll do a lot. They have a lot of calculators in there. Play around with it. Just look what those options are to you. As well as PERF, there are people, as Mary Kay said, who we have in our libraries that will come and talk with you. And you can use their services, but talk to a lot of people and find out what it looks like for you and what those changes are that are going to affect you. And again, I can't stress enough that healthcare is one of those biggest things that you need to be concerned about.
There was a comment in the chat that I think is really good too. We've been talking so much about preparing ourselves for retirement, but not really talking, at least up to this point, about preparing our staff for our departure as well as our boards. Yes. And what some of the best practices are for all of that. Again, I haven't totally been through that process, although my staff knows that I look forward to retirement, but not in a way that like, oh, I can't stand to get away from you people. I present it in a way of it's something I'm looking forward to. It's something I've earned. So I'm trying to have my retirement have something that's very positive. So even years out, they can embrace that change and feel good about it. And with my board, they're also pretty well aware of my intentions. I've actually even negotiated my salary all the way through my retirement date. It could be changed, obviously, but that way I'm looking at that high 5. Your PERF is based on that high 5, and typically your high 5 years of earning are your last years on the job if you've continued to ascend the ladder. So be thinking about those things too, and thinking about do those calculations. They're right there on your PERF statement, right on the front. You can figure out if I make this much a year or this much in my high 5, what's my monthly defined benefit going to look like, and work with your board on all of that so that you're looking out for yourself. But don't just look out for yourself, look out for your staff and your board and just the good of the library.
Part of the planning to retire is a large part of it is your financial, but Ingrid's question about preparing your staff and preparing your successor. There's all kinds of plans you can have in place, but if you have an assistant director, if you have an assistant, and you know that person's going to be promoted or you are recommending that person for promotion, constantly document things. A silly 5x7 legal pad, little half legal pad was what I used. And I just had a day or a page for every month and went through and wrote the dates on, much like the old state library monthly calendars we used to get back in the old days. that told us what days we had to file what things, and handed that off and said, here it is. I'm on hand if you have questions. But also some of turning it over is letting that person stretch his or her legs in the position. And if you're on hand to witness it, you have to be able to back up. And that can be kind of difficult from time to time. The second part of the question we had is about the vision for the library, and I wanted to address that a little bit. And the easiest way I can say it is be prepared to witness change. And keep in the forefront of your mind that it is not a critique of your administration. Whether you're completely leaving the system or you're changing roles in the system, do not let those changes bother you, because change happens. Change is inevitable. And a new administrator brings new eyes to the game. So be prepared for that person to bring a new perspective to the work that you always did, A, B, C, D. This person's going to do it differently. It's going to do 1, 2, 3, and it's going to be a whole different lineup. Is the job going to get done? Yes. Are the patrons going to get served? Yes. Is that what we're here for? Absolutely. So you need to sit back and let what happens happen. That's kind of a tough one to watch. You can express your vision, but when you hand it off, you hand off your vision. So always keep that in mind.
Yeah, and Mary Kay, I think the advice you gave earlier about, not hanging out at the library every day is really important. Yes. When it comes to that. Give it some time. If you visit the library the day after your retirement and they move the large print books, like the day you were gone, you're like, wow, they really did not like where I wanted the large print books. But if it's had time, and you think, okay, there have been some conversations and this has been mindful change for one reason or another, I think it's probably good to give it a little bit of time and embrace your legacy. Like you said, too, just this is what you did, be proud of what you did, but now it's time to pass it off to somebody else and hope that they can be proud of what they're doing as well.
And I think every library has maybe one disgruntled staff member who will buttonhole you and say, do you know what she did? Don't become an ally to negativity in a new administration. Just, well, oh, look at the time, I've got to go, I've got a lunch date, get out of it. So standing back a little bit keeps you out of that whole game.
Yeah, I think I'd add just one thing to that, and that is that you want to show confidence in your successor. So anytime Absolutely. You can take them and introduce them to network in the community and ensure that those that and have some trust and faith in what you've been doing know that you feel the same way about the person that's stepping into your shoes. And it's a great opportunity for them also to see a little bit about what's going on. And also you can tell them the stories, let them know a little bit about where those risks are and what the good parts are. And that's true of everything and all of the things that are going on. So I think that showing your confidence is extremely important.
And I think too, showing your confidence too is, Mary Kay, you made a comment that you were retiring when your bond retires. So at that point, it's almost like you're giving your successor the opportunity for yes. millions of dollars to do what they want to do with it. I've done something similar with the timing of my retirement with a bond rolling off as well as my long range plan. So when my successor comes on, they're going to be under a long range plan for that year. So they've got some guidance and they aren't at sea. But that next year, it's theirs for them to run with it and develop something new. Same thing with the bond. Once they have that in place, then they can go after some money and do what they want. So lining those critical things up for your library and basically handing them an opportunity, I think really speaks to the fact that you do have confidence in them and you do support them.
Also, my retiring when the bond retires sets a definite timeline. I'm not going to stay here till I'm 95 and coming in on my walker with my adult undergarments on to check out books because I'm not really able to function and do much else, but I won't give up the ghost. I have a definite timeline. Am I still going to work? Yes. Am I going to do other things? Absolutely. But this is when I walk away from this system and say, I've done the best I can for this library service. It's time for me to go.
Excellent points, everything. Let's go on to the next one, succession plans. How do you get ready to go? I know Lynn's put some stuff together, and we'll just, if Lynn wants to start, maybe.
Sure. So, with succession planning, you have expected departures and you have unexpected departures. And I think other panelists are probably more well-versed in the expected departures. But I want to talk a little bit about those unexpected departures when your business manager just up and quits, or if somebody passes away, or anything can happen where all of a sudden maybe one of your critical positions is unfilled and what's going to fall between the cracks. So when you're looking at your succession planning, I mean, obviously it's going to look different for every organization. Your size is going to dictate the types of things that you're looking at, just the overall organization, your organizational chart. And in the process of succession planning, you may end up taking a closer look at some of those things like your organizational chart. So succession planning could lead to greater changes within the organization. But really, I was thinking we can kind of take our cues from COVID. When COVID hit at the very beginning and we were closed, we very quickly figured out what our essential functions were and how we could deliver them, and what we absolutely had to continue doing, not only for our patrons, but also for us internally, just to function as an organization. So I think that's a good place to start. Think about the absolute must-have things that need to occur in the organization. Payroll. People have to get paid. Is there more than one person in your organization that knows how to do payroll? So it's that kind of thing. And it's across the gamut. It's not just, what the director does or what, your HR people do, but what if your custodian passes away? You can't go 3 days without collecting the trash in a public facility. Who's going to do that? Now, is that something you can figure out in a couple days? Someone will just fill the job and then I'll hire a cleaning company to come in and do it in 3 days? Or do I have to document step by step what I'm going to do? So you just have to think about all of those things. And when something falls through the cracks, how bad is it? Whom does it affect? And how quickly, could I maybe pull somebody else in to be able to look at some of these things? Kind of like others were mentioning, keeping a calendar of all that you do is good. Start with yourself, your own job. What are you doing that nobody else knows? I file a monthly report for the Bureau of Labor Statistics to tell them how many employees I have and how many of them are women. What happens if I don't file that report? Probably nothing. But what if I don't do my PCI compliance for my credit card report or my credit card company? That's probably a little bit more significant. I get these reminders for these reports on email. So instead of just those emails coming to me, I'm going to add somebody else to those email lists. So those reminders come to somebody else. And then it's just a quick conversation that, hey, I'll take care of this report as long as I'm here. But if for some reason I can't do this report, this email will be your reminder and the login information is on the spreadsheet. Internal controls are a concern when you're looking at succession planning because you don't want too many hands in the pot. You don't want to cross-train 16 people on how to do payroll or how to submit your budget. So you have to be mindful on whom you choose to, help you out with some of those things, whom you're going to cross-train. Cross-training is great when you're looking at particularly other positions. Do you have one other person who knows how to do interlibrary loan? Do some cross-training there and then document. Document is so important, but documentation also needs to be updated. If you've got a facilities document that shows how to reset your boiler, and then you got a new boiler and the pictures in your document don't look anything like what's back in the mechanical room, it's not helpful. So you have to continually update documentation, which can be very time consuming. So it's important that you really get your head around at the very beginning, what needs to be documented from the beginning of this process versus what can we probably just figure out as reasonable people.
I'll add just a tiny bit there. And I think one of the things that we had referred to as no single point of failure. So it's the same as Lynn mentioned, is that just to ensure that that anything that a person does that may be primarily or only responsible for, that you know what it is, and that there's somebody else who might be able to step in or at least have instruction to take care of it. And as we all know, jobs morph with the people in them. So what you need to ensure that your job descriptions are up to date. So if people are responsible, what their responsibilities are, and associated with that, what the skill or talents that are required to actually do that are, so that so the succession planning is forever. So anytime you have positions that are open, and that's both fortunate and unfortunate, as we know, that you take a look and see how the jobs have changed over time, how they need to continue to change moving forward, because it's your opportunity to make those changes when those positions are open. And so I think what we're leading to here is that it often changes your organization, and that's okay. Changing organizationally to what you need is obviously the most important part of ensuring that you have a good library that serves the community going forward. So just use those opportunities to make changes, and even write it down, knowing that when this position that you think is going to be open in a year or two happens, then it needs to adjust in this way to meet greater needs of the community. So from the director side of things and doing succession planning on that, what I would add is that I took the director's manual from the state library, and I always had it on my desk to refer to, but I took that and I added to it. I added what I would call an orientation checklist kind of things, the things that you want to teach a person when they're new on a job, and the things that were things related to the community, specific to Monroe County, the things that a person needed to know, or the people that someone needed to know, and then we just, the new director sent me questions that were related to, so how do you do this? And so we just had an opportunity to just spend a lot of time going over the whole checklist of things that a person needed to know on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis.
I think part of it is part of preparing for that, your succession plan, is realizing that every library succession plan is going to be different. Many years ago, about 11 years ago, my board created the position of an assistant director and we hired an individual, and she began the job knowing that if she stayed with the organization, she would succeed my directorship. And one very wise question, Kim put it in the notes, was about being emotionally prepared. And that's just as individual as anything else. You can set a timeline, but COVID ate my brain. I'm going to be very frank about that. I did not have COVID. I have not had COVID. I managed COVID, and I managed closed libraries, and we managed through the COVID year and a half, about 18 months, and I became an emergency manager. I forgot how to manage an administration that was planned and with forethought, and I became a drop and run manager, and I couldn't shake it. And that's when I said, I need to step back. What alternatives do I have other than handing off roles and staying in the directorship? What alternatives do I have? And we had a vacant branch manager's position, and we approached the board with different viewpoints of how do we fill this position? Do we want to hire somebody? Do we want to talk to someone within? Do we want me to step back? And we reorganized. So what we chose to do was our assistant director was promoted to the directorship. It kept me on hand for mentoring and taking care of those little deets. One little deet, this weekend, the power went out, and we realized that our power utility still emails me when the power's out. We just forgot to change that account over. So it's something we could take care after. Not a big deal. The big things were addressed, but all those little cleanup things are taken care of. So when I walk out of here December 31st of 2023, I walk out of here a free woman, just like I've been released from prison. And I got my suitcase and $20 and I'm gone. And I don't have to respond to, what do we do when the well pump doesn't work right at this? How do we prime that pump? Everybody knows how to prime that pump. So those things are addressed. But with that promotion, we looked within our organization to fill positions. And when you look within your organization, you save time and money, promoting within. You help with motivation and with staff retention. It's much less risky for the organization because you already have somebody that understands the underpinnings of the organization. I think I might be the only person here with a Ball State University library science degree. There were 60 of us at one point in time. And it's an ALA MLS. But it's an old ALA MLS. And we had a professor named Dr. Barr, and Dr. Barr used to say, in your library organization, there's only ever one open position. There's only ever one open job. And this is kind of true when you start promoting from within. As everybody changes seats, you see you only have that one position to fill. And for us, it was a clerical position. People were promoted, young people that have been with us and have watched us grow. So we were very fortunate that we had people who were qualified or who could become qualified, who could earn their certifications very easily to fill our positions. But as to emotional preparedness, trust me, you'll know. You'll get up that one morning and it won't be just oh, I'd like to lay around the house because it's cloudy and rainy. It'll be, I have to go do it again. And you'll know that it's time.
And I also found some good information about, you've all mentioned writing it down in notebooks. Maybe people want to do something online like OneNote, Evernote, however you can do it, just write it down.
I wanted to add something to what Marilyn had mentioned too about reviewing job descriptions. Don't always just assume because you're the director that you know what should be in those job descriptions. Talk with your staff, because your staff, they can help you update their own job descriptions. They know what they're doing better than you do, believe it or not. And yes, that again might lead to some changes in the organization, in the structure, in what your jobs actually are called, what they do. But also be mindful of the fact that when you have people who are kind of the keeper of the keys, as I like to call them, they can be sometimes reluctant to give that information up. So when you're having conversations with staff to really drill down into what do you do exactly, there may be some suspicion as to why you're asking these questions and why you want them to give up their keys for some of those things. So just be aware that that may be the reaction. There might be some suspicion there, and just be perfectly transparent of why you're trying to get that information, for documentation and updating the job description. And then unrelated to that, don't leave a mess. And I mean literally and figuratively, but more kind of literally. I mean, don't leave a mess in your storage areas. Don't leave a mess in your office areas. I work with a lot of new directors who have taken on their jobs, and they've got enough to figure out without going through boxes and boxes of receipts from the 70s that should have been thrown away a long time ago. So that's another reason I'm getting started way early, is I am cleaning house. So take some time.
Clean out your filing cabinet.
Clean house.
Yes. Diane Dunnigan said something brilliant in the chat, that she's doing Zoom recordings of herself doing day-to-day tasks and leaving them on a thumb drive for her successor. And I thought, embrace that technology. Wow, I never would have thought of, Zooming myself getting a bank deposit ready, or Zooming myself doing some technological hoo-ha, but good idea.
Great idea.
So one of our questions here, is there a succession plan for dummies?
I'm not aware of anything like that. I hope we've given you a little bit of, not that I'm calling anybody a dummy, but maybe a little bit of a framework to help kind of fill some of that stuff in.
So someone needs to write a book.
Like 15 years ago, the state library, and I think PLA, and it was in Indianapolis, that's the best I can remember, and I probably pitched my notes from it, had a succession planning workshop day. And I attended that, and it was brilliant, and it kind of helped me focus. But there are occasionally workshops out there, you just have to keep your eyes open on them. Like us, we're a workshop for that.
Yep. And so much of it is so individual to your organization.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's go on to our next one. Mentoring an incoming director. if you think Mary Kay is probably the one doing that right now.
To some degree. Be sure that you have a distinct job description. If you stay within your organization, that your job description, your new job description is clear and distinct from the directorship. Don't offer your opinion. That individual may not want it. Wait for an invitation. Be a polite girl. If your successor has someone who's worked closely with you prior to being promoted, that individual has a plan. That person has things put together in his or her head of how they want things to go. And you may not be a part of that plan, and that's okay. Also, change is going to happen that you didn't anticipate, that you weren't in the inner circle of information for. And keep in mind, think back on your own administration. You didn't tell everybody what you had in mind either. So you need to step back from the emotional and start thinking logically. And sometimes that's hard for folks to do. I've talked about this before. Have an established transition time and stick to it no matter what. Don't be the last bell at the ball. Don't overstay your welcome. This sounds like something you put on a t-shirt or on a plaque in your office, but if you always wanted team players as a director, as an administrator, we all want team players. Show the rest of the team how to be a team player. If you stay in the employment of the library and the employee of the library, be prepared to be the good example.
And I'll add a little bit to this, just to talk a bit about how you might feel. So once you have announced your retirement date, and for those of you who that's long-term, you're working and working and working and just doing the same old thing that you would do every day. But at some point in time, and you have to pick this date too, you need to say, now I'm not the one that's going to make that decision, because I'm not the one that has to live with it. And you need to let your successor do that. And that's before you leave. So you have to, as Mary Kay said, you have to pass it on and step back and let it watch it happen, and offer advice if it's asked, if somebody requests it, but otherwise let them do what they're going to do, because it's their job now.
And this is specific to staying within the organization after you've stepped out of the director's role, and I call it stepping back. After you've stepped back, staff are still going to look to you for questions, and you're still going to have that history of authority, even though you don't have that authority now. When staff come to you with questions, say, you have to ask the director. You need to talk to the director. You know what you may well know what the director is going to say. You know the answer. You did the job for umpteen years. Don't break that person's chain of authority. You didn't like it when it was done to you as a new director. Don't do it to your successor. So supervise your staff, don't direct them. You have to be able to step back and allow that new person to get his or her own feet wet. And be prepared to train your replacement. Our board has already planned to hire my replacement before I exit, and I will be training that individual. So I guess the easiest way for me to say it is live your life like somebody's going to come in and take over your job, because that's what's going to happen. And you need to leave that person a clean slate. I think we all have come into directorships with messy underpinnings. We've had to clean up mistakes. We've had to, for us here, there was nothing. I came into nothing. And so I don't want to leave nothing. I want to leave something for the next person to build on. Leave a good foundation. I'll shut up.
Yeah, this is great. It goes on to I'll go click on the question that came with that. This person, I guess they're not a director, but it's valid.
It's hard to motivate people. It's hard to know what their what motivates people. I mean, money is, a big one right now. We used to think a long time ago that people would work for $10 an hour at the library and forgo the extra $3 they could make at McDonald's because it was such a nice environment. And it's not necessarily that way anymore. And so, money may be a motivating factor. We talk about younger people and what motivates younger people, and they do sometimes have different values in what they're looking for in a workplace. And so I think talk with some of those individuals and find out, what is it that would get them to want to invest more in the library, and just be aware of maybe you've got a staff member who reads library journal when they're on break, or who likes to buy t-shirts for the summer reading program and wear them on a Saturday when they're out and about with their family and friends. You can see just from your day-to-day interactions with your staff who's into it and who's not. And, the people who are into it may not be necessarily the people that you have in mind for moving up the ladder, but you can't teach passion. And passion is a big part of it. So I think in this particular example, if you have individual staff members that you want to move up, that you think they have potential, find out what would motivate them to want to stick around and move up the ladder in the library. And it may just not be something for them. This may just be a job for them, and they're looking for something else. In the meantime, it's not their career, and we can accept that. Of course, we all think it's a great career, but it's not for everybody. But yeah, just like there in the chat, more money would help a lot, unfortunately, and that's easier said than done.
Yep. Thinking back on our own careers, those of us who have MLSs or certifications did not come out of those programs going, I want to be a library director. I did not. This was not how I wanted to land in this career. Did I make a career out of being a library director? Yeah, I did. So be it. People seek directorships for different reasons, and most people don't come out of graduate school or programs going, I want to be a library director. That's what I want to do. They come out being reference librarians, children's people. I wanted to be tech services. Tech services is still Valhalla for me. I embraced directorship because I came out of a mismanaged library. It was mismanaged at one point, and I thought, you know what, I can do better. I would rather take all the responsibility than have to go through that again, being managed by a bad manager. So that was my deciding point. Mary Eckerly had a question about who did you tell first, the board or the staff? My personal situation was worked out with the board and with my assistant director. So the board was very aware of it after they made a final determination, because it took them months to decide. We spent months going over this. Then we waited a couple of weeks and told the staff. We told them all together in one room at a system-wide staff meeting, because I did not want to go to one branch and tell the staff, then go to the next branch and already have a phone call have been made or an email exchanged, or one clerk say to another clerk, did you hear the news about Mary Kay? No, you're all going to learn it at the same time, and there's no she knew before I knew or what was going on. I try to avoid that kind of hoo-ha, and I still do, in fact. But again, how you declare what's happening to your board and your staff is individual to you and to your library system and to your community and your own situation. So
I wanted to point something out in the question on the screen. I noticed the third line from the bottom says, they seem to be happy where they are. And that sounds good to me right there. I put a period on that and just run with that. The person might be checking out books and talking about books with the front desk or at the front desk with patrons, and they might love that. They don't want to move into administration because they have no interest in crunching numbers. So all of the jobs within the library are different, and the higher up the ladder you move, typically the less involved you are in core library work. And if that's where someone's passion lies and they're happy doing that, I take that as a victory.
Yep.
So there was a question also about how much time I gave the board notice, and I'll answer two pieces of this. So I first told my associate director, my HR director, and an assistant manager before telling the board. But then I told the board president and let them know that the other people who already knew, because obviously it is the board's decision about the way that they wish to hire the director. And so at that point, I was giving them, that was in January, and my retirement day was May 3rd. So about 5 months or so. And we talked through, the board and I, the way that we were going to communicate, the way we would communicate with all of the staff. And obviously this is very different depending upon the library that you're in. So with the multi-branch system and about 160 people, I'm never going to get everybody in the same room. So I did an announcement via email, but I also did it in staff meetings and did it in a variety of ways and places so that people knew about it. But it was a little bit of time before we actually, the staff knew about it, because in the background, the board was figuring out the way that they wanted to move forward with replacement. So this is one of those situations where you need to work with your board, that you need to find out what they're comfortable with and what they want to do in terms of replacement for the position. I gave them a lot of my own opinion about the way that they could do it. I helped them walk through what they could do in terms of an outside person, a search group, the people that I thought could be internal that were good. So work with them to talk about what the possibilities are and what looks promising for your institution.
Kathy Von Lloyd said something in the notes in the chat. And sometimes bringing someone in from outside can be a good thing. So keep that in mind too, bringing in a different set of eyes. Bringing in either another director to help with a new director search, maybe a colleague who could help the board, using a headhunting organization, but sometimes new eyes help with that process as well.
And the question about executive session or just a regular meeting, I told the board individually and not in any meeting. And then they did have an executive session for discussion about what the next step should be. They had more than one.
We discussed in open meeting, and the board made their determination for me to become system specialist and our assistant director to be promoted to director in an open meeting. So it was all done very openly and very candidly.
I think you guys also, when we were talking about getting prepared for this, someone mentioned that the director really doesn't have a voice in getting the new director or who you're going to pick.
Yep, it's a good time for the director, the acting director, to step back and let the board make that decision. I have worked for, in 27 years as a director, phenomenal boards. Supportive, compassionate, professional, incredible boards. For 27 years, I have said, question me. Do not take what I tell you at face value. Do not let me make all the decisions. You have to make decisions. I can give you information, but you have to step up and make your own choices. And this is a situation where they've learned that they have to think for themselves, because we all know how our boards can be. They can be very trusting. They can be very suspicious as well, but usually they're very trusting of our opinions. As well, they should be, but I wanted them to question me. I wanted them to not get caught in a trap of letting the director serve as the board.
I do think, though, it could be helpful, not to be involved in the process. You're not sitting in on interviews. You're not saying, reviewing resumes and, oh, you definitely want to talk to this person or anything like that. But if you as a director, like, have ever had to hire an IT person and you don't know the first thing about IT, that's a really hard interview to have. And if your library can't afford a headhunter, you might have, 7 board members or a handful of board members interviewing a library director and not really knowing what kinds of questions to ask to drill down to how well you can do the essential functions of your job. So I think a conversation with your board about, the types of education and experience and skills are a good fit, because if you've been in that position for a very long time and have just been knocking it out of the park, they might think, well, we just want you 2.0, but skills need to evolve and change over time. So I think helping them with that, is acceptable and good for them. And they also, there was a library that I heard of here in Indiana where the board was advertising the director position, and they were absolutely clueless. They didn't know what to do, that they put a radio ad on the local country music channel. So, I mean, maybe you're going to get somebody that way, but, does your board know that they can go to the state library and advertise? Do they, they may not be aware of those channels. So I think it is in your, purview as a professional in the field to help guide them a little bit in that way, just so they can have a successful job search.
I agree with that. I think that they don't know what they don't know. So I think it's very important to be available to them, to offer them both an opportunity to see a little bit behind the scenes of what you do, if they don't know that already, and have those conversations about the kinds of skills that are really required to get that work done for the stuff that you have to do that's in your job description. And again, job descriptions for directors are very different depending upon library. So just again, knowing what that is.
Yeah, and on this slide, I should have put on there, definitely we have the Indiana State Library has a job section that you could post jobs when you're looking for people. Listservs, I should have put that on here too, but also here's a few other places you might also check into and think about. I think we're almost ready to wrap up. I'm going to go on to our next slide. And I know if we didn't get your questions answered in the chat, I'll definitely get those copied and send them out to all the presenters, and they can put their final thoughts if we didn't get it talked about. So any final advice now?
Enjoy your successes. You had them, and this is a great time to do it. I know, and I'm personally speaking here, but I will say that as I went through my files, as I was cleaning house, I would come across something and think, oh man, I really blew that, or that was really hard. And then there were all of those others that were, this was great. So write down some of those things that you did and know what those were that were successes, and enjoy them, and take that with you, because it can be kind of it can be very emotional.
Just like that old Guy Carlson book about don't sweat the small stuff. Don't look at the little things. The nuts and bolts things will eventually all get worked out. But as you're exiting, as I always say, I've got one foot out the door, the other foot on a banana peel. That's my statement around here the last few months. Look at the successes you made. Don't look at the things that were left unfinished, or the things that went by the wayside and rolled down in the ditch as you made your journey through directorship. Look at what you accomplished, because those are your laurels. Those are the things that you need to look back on and be proud of the changes you brought to your community. I recently got something taken care of I've tried to do for several years that stepping out of the directorship allowed me the time to do, but it's part of the legacy I'm going to leave, because the legacy you leave isn't going to be the paperwork and the day-to-day stuff. It's going to be the facilities, the services, the community changes that you helped to promote. So look at your big picture.
I'm honestly too far out to really give any final advice on retirement, but I can think of just kind of a guiding principle through my entire career, and that is to always act in the best interests of the library. And I think in talking about retirement, we think very much about our own self-interest. But if your heart's in the right place and you genuinely want to see the library succeed and you want to see your successors do a good job and just embrace all of that, that's the best start you can possibly have in this process, is make sure that your heart is in the right place and that you're acting in the best interests of the library. And that, I think, is things can follow naturally if you genuinely are there.
All right. I want to thank all three of you. This has been amazing. I want to thank Lynn, Mary Kay, and Marilyn. So much great information and wisdom. And just as a reminder, if you are watching the archive recording of the presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description on YouTube. So go ahead and stop the recording.